The agenda for today is to first of all look at what is space from a more conceptual level, look at what is in there, what the philosophy of space is, and so on. And then I think that's going to be the major part of this entire webinar. We're going to go into demo mode and demo all of the things that are in space, see how they fit together, how they work together, how you can use them in your systems, and so on. So with that, let's start with the first thing. What is space? Not everyone in a typical company always uses the same tools. For example, at JetBrains, we used to have a chat tool to communicate, a tool to schedule meetings. There would be someone using a separate issue tracker, separate CI/CD, documentation, and just regular word processing docs would be in other cloud services as well. And everything was glued together using some webhooks, or worse, by naming conventions and folder structures in, for example, those documentation or documents clouds that are available. So that's kind of annoying and not super easy to work with. People would forget those folder structures, the integration would be brittle, cumbersome, and always something would be up with that integration. Now, all of these tools are typically great by themselves. It's just really hard to manage that entire landscape and make sure the integrations keep working properly. They're also not really integrated, and that's really where space comes in. Space is the integration that combines all of those different tools together to make sure that everyone in your company or your organization can work together using the exact same platform. In space, we have that integrated platform where we look at teams and work from 3 angles. First of all, work starts with people and teams in the company. They all work on things together, and those things are typically projects. They organize around a certain topic, around a certain project, and then work together in those things. What we also do is collaborate. If you have people, if you have projects, that's okay, but it's still separate things. So we also provide the tools that integrate those things together, integrate the people and the projects together, and make sure that you have a good way to collaborate efficiently with everyone in your team. On the people side, what we have is more than just user and permission management. Very often, every single tool has, again, user management and permission management. We wanted to go further and integrate the entire company structure. So if you look at people in space, it's not just permissions, roles, groups, etc. It's really the organization structure that is in there with teams, where you can see calendars for a team, where you have locations where a team is located inside of your company or inside of the building. There are still permissions and roles, but it's not like you would do in any other tool. It's really around the organization structure rather than having a permission and role model in there. The interesting thing by combining all those things together is that by having all that information, space gives you some nice possibilities. Like, for example, your chat status could update automatically when you go on vacation, because space already knows that you are on vacation, and we can immediately show that in the chat that we have in space. Also, when people decide to open up a code review, for example, people can also see whether they should include you or not based on your availability that is known in the calendar of our people tracking or people management part in space. On the project side, we wanted to support all of the creative projects. Right now, this means mostly developers, but we also want to target designers, internal IT, and really anyone who could benefit from using one or more of the tools that space provides for such projects. Right now, we still have a big developer focus, but that's the result of dogfooding space for a long time in JetBrains. And software development is obviously what we do, so that's where we put most attention so far. Linking the project side strongly together with the people side also makes it easy to find out who's working together, what their role is, what they are doing in that project, etc. With that, it's demo time. I'll show you some of the collaboration features as well, but I think they make more sense to show them in the demo. So we'll start with showing off the homepage, what space looks like. We'll then go into projects, code, and code reviews, so that developer focus. Also focus a little bit on automation. It's still not there yet in the early access preview for space that we have, but I still want to show you a couple of things so you have an idea of what it is and what it can mean for you. And then we'll dive into people and collaboration and everything around that. And in the meanwhile, I'll try to have a quick break every once in a while so we can handle questions. Right, let's switch to space. Before we start, I do want to mention I have two browser windows open in space. I have a light theme, which is this one. That is the user Martin. If I sometimes have to switch to a different user, that's going to be Heather, and Heather as the dark browser in the dark space theme here as well. So if you see different colors, it means we're a different person in the demo. So let's start. Once you log into Space, you will see the Space homepage. And on the homepage, you really get a personalized information dashboard of what your day looks like or what's new for you and what is happening for you. So the things you will see there is meetings, for example. We can see that I have a daily stand-up today, which has already ended, so that's good. I have a vacation coming up this Thursday, which is also nice. There's more vacation coming up, which is even nicer. A business trip at some point. If it still happens, there's an event happening. So all of those things we can see there. There's also the teams that I work in. So I'm in the software development team, and for the software development team, we can immediately see who is around or who is unavailable. So we can see, for example, that Christiana Brennan is unavailable. So I don't have to dive into the team, dive into calendars. I get this at a glance on my homepage here. Some other things that we get is the projects that I work on. Could be me working on those things in a private project, could be projects that other people work with me together. I can see code reviews where I can see whether I have to attend to those code reviews or just for information purposes. And there's also the blog that gives me information that is relevant to me. So what the blog will show you is the blog posts that target either the entire organization or target just the teams that I am in or the projects that I work on or even the locations that I work in. So all of the blog information that you see here is relevant to me, or at least people think it's relevant to me, and I can use that to dive in and read whatever is happening. There's also some events. So for example, if there's a company-wide event, people can schedule that and they will show up in the events. But there's also things like holidays and so on that we can see in the events page there. But let's first dive into projects. And I'm going to dive into this Ktor.io project here. So on the project homepage, what you will see is a quick description of the project. There's the name of the project as well. And this gives you a little bit of information on what this project is about. In this case, we're apparently working on a framework for building servers and clients, and we can immediately read that and we can get some information about what that means. We can also see who is involved in this project. We see that there's one team and 9 members involved in a project. And that's actually a very interesting or a very important distinction that we have in space. Projects are not necessarily the same as teams. A team is more of an organizational aspect, whereas a project is really designed to be self-contained and independently managed with its own permission set and so on, where a project can hold multiple teams, multiple team members, where people from the organization basically work together on something that is either infinite or finite at some point in the future. So people can participate in projects, but they are not necessarily focused around teams that you would have in space. What else is on here? Well, we can see code reviews that need my attention again, but specific to this project in this case. We can see the repositories that we can work with as software developers. We can see issues, we can see checklists, and so on. I'm going to dive into all of those in a little bit, but let's first maybe start with the developer focus and look at what repositories can do for us. So every project in space can have 0, 1, or more repositories. And for every repository, we can host our Git-based repositories in there. Now, typically, repositories can be a couple of types. And I'm going to quickly create a new one, not actually create it, but just quickly show this dialog that we have here. Repositories can be either greenfield, where you start from scratch with creating a new repository, either completely empty, where you commit an already existing repo, or with a simple README and Git attributes file that is in there. But imagine you are also migrating into space. What you can do is when you create your Git repo in space, in a space project, you can either migrate it from another Git hosting. So for example, if you're using GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever, you can use this option to do an initial migration of a remote repository into space. There's also a second option where you do that initial migration, but keep mirroring the repository afterwards. So if there's still developers or customers that you have that are still working on that third-party repo that you have, then you can do that here and you can work with that repo. And once people push changes to, sorry for that, once people push changes to your repo, you will see that the repo in Space gets updated, but the repo in the other Git hosting also gets updated, and vice versa. If people commit to the other one, you will see those changes pop up in here as well. I'm not going to create a new one, but just wanted to show you that there's a couple of different options that you have there when creating a repository. Right, I have two repositories in this project. There's Ktor, which is a mirrored one where we update from the actual public repo that is on GitHub for the Ktor project. And I have Ktor samples, which is one that is hosted just on this Space instance and that we can work with. Let's go into one of these repos. For every repo, you will see, like you would expect, a list of commits that have happened in the repo. And for every commit, we can see what is happening there. We can see the changes that were in there. For every change, we can dive into that change and look at the diff of the sources that have been updated in there. So we can see all of those things. There's also the other way around, where instead of looking at the commits, we look at files. And that allows you to browse your entire repo, see whatever is in there. We can open pretty much every folder that is in there, look at the files that are in there, etc., etc. Also, one thing that I want to mention here is that in a repo, you can also search for files. So for example, in this repo, what I can do is use the shortcuts or either use the icon here on the left, where we can search for anything and basically look for example, a file. So let's search for cache control, which in there that I know. We can quickly navigate to that one and see what is in there, look at the source code and so on. So that is there. Searching for files is really repo specific. So only in this repo, you will see the files that are in that repo. So you don't get search results that are cluttered with things that may not be of interest for you. Also for the repo, there's a README file. So if you have a README file in your repo, you can actually display that here and people can see how they can get started with the project, how they can set up their development environment and so on. I'm not gonna dive too deep into this. There's one additional thing that I want to show here though, and that is that for every file in source control or in your Git repo, what you can do is open it up and you can always add comments. So you don't need to have a formal code review or anything. If I have a question about something that is happening in the source code here, what I can do is quickly add a comment there and ask, for example, our entire team, what is this about? Does anyone know? And what we'll see is that everyone in the team will get a quick notification about this and they can respond to that from wherever they are. So I'm going to quickly do that. I'm going to quickly switch to headers, header space, and you will see that she got a notification in chats. And from the chat, she will see that for this build.gradle file, there's a comment there where I ask about what this is about and people can answer. She can either go to the actual file to get more context, see whatever is happening, but maybe from seeing these couple of lines of code, she already knows what it is and she can respond from the chat there. Let's not add an answer, but you get the idea, you can respond from there. Right, back to my repo. We can browse the code here, but I'm not going to dive in too deep into code because that's something that comes back later on. Let's maybe look at some other things that are in our projects. So in our project, we have issues and checklists. Let's first maybe start with checklists. Checklists are really similar to issues, but they are not the same as issues. So a checklist is really about either having really fine-grained details on what you have to do for a certain task, or the high-level picture where you can, for example, start planning your next features. So for example, if you would say we want to add open telemetry support at some point, we can start adding elements in there, we can start adding items, we can use the arrow keys and start adding items in there. So let's say build additional features. At some point, we also want to test those features and then probably ship them. And I think this is really important. So what we can also do is select these things and move them up or create issues from them and so on. So from these checklists that are the high-level overview of what your project is about to do or become, you can create issues that will be linked with the checklist item there. So if you have high-level planning, this is something that you can use. There are going to be boards where you can see issues and so on as well, but right now this is the way to go about planning in space. All right, checklists. Let's go to issues now. Issues are really specifics. In checklists, what we had was an overview of what we wanted to achieve with a future feature in our product. What we can do with issues is really go into details about that. So for example, we can say we want to implement a time command in our chat application with a description. We can add attachments. We can, for example, say, okay, this is cool. Let's do this. We can add tags, we can add a status and so on. And I can even assign this one to myself, for example, and say that I'm the assignee for this issue. People can subscribe to issues. So there's that subscription icon on the top right there that people can click and they get notified about things. What's also interesting, I already showed you that by commenting on code, there's a chat window that is going to open. What we can also do is add comments here and involve other people in the team. So for example, here, if I would say, Heather, is this okay to start working on? What will happen is that she will again get a chat notification where she sees this comment and she can respond from within that chat window. So the key point of this entire webinar basically is that Space really benefits from integrating all of the tools together. And this is one of those integrations where chat is a very central aspect to what is happening in Space. And you will see from issues, from source code, from code reviews and so on, people can start adding comments. And once they tag you, the other party that is involved will see those in their chats. What is really great about that is that you don't have to always switch into that issue, even though you can, but the other person can simply respond from chat. So like with the codes example that we had previously, they can also respond from here and say, for example, okay, go for it. And what I will see is in that issue, this comment is being added. All right, I will go for this one in a little bit, but before we go there, I want to quickly show one additional thing that is in projects. Very often, especially in larger organizations or where there's multiple projects that are happening, it's very difficult to figure out who is actually owning a certain feature or a certain aspect of whatever you have in that project. So what you can do in Space is set up a list of responsibilities that everyone in the company can access. So for example, for this Gator project, we can see what the responsibilities are and who is the responsible person for those. Imagine I would have to work on the HTTP stack here. I can click the profiles and I can see, for example, that this person is on vacation, whereas Heather here is available. So I can ask her on chat, for example, can you explain me something about this HTTP stack that we have there? So all of those things I can easily figure out from that project overview. Also, having this not on some doc site or on a cloud document hosting provider is much easier because this one is really scoped to the current project. So for this project, it's easy to find who is responsible for what. All right, now let's start maybe working with code a little bit. So we had those repos in there. And once we have a repo, let me click correctly. Once we have a repo, what we can do is we can find the git clone URL for every repo, and we can start working with that immediately using any Git clients. If you have an IntelliJ based IDE, what you can also do is make use of the Space plugin, and that one will add a quick menu where you can clone a repo and start working immediately with that repo that you are about to clone. And the plugin, what it will do is it will show you all of the projects and repos that you have access to. But I already did that to make a couple of changes and to make the demo a little bit smoother and quicker. So let's maybe start working with code here. So what I did was I started working on that issue that talked about adding a time command to the server. So what I did was add these couple of lines of code. And what I'm going to do is annotate that commit with implement time commands, commit and push and send it off to the server. Now, one thing that is good to know is that I also created a custom branch for this one. So I'm working on a branch specific to this feature. And at some point, I would like to merge this into the trunk so that this gets shipped with our product that we have. So let's see how we can do that. We can see that there's new commits available, so we can look at the commits that are in there, or we can look at the branches and see which branches are available in the projects that we have. What I'm going to do is from here, I'm going to create a merge request and make sure that I can merge all of the changes that I have in my branch into the master branch that we have in our repo. So I'm going to create a merge request. I'm going to name it and say implement time commands. And the next thing I can do is start assigning reviewers on this one. So what I'm going to do, I already know that header is around. So I'm going to say, okay, header, look, can you please maybe look at this code change that I have and start working on that. Interesting to know is that code reviews, or at least merge requests, are turn-based in Space, which means once I finish adding reviews, the other person will start working or get a notification that they have to start working on this code review. So let's switch to headers window. And what we can see there is that she was added as a reviewer. So again, she can see this from chats, or she can dive into the actual code review and start working on that one. So what she can do here is go through all of the lines of code that are in there and see what was changed. So apparently a couple of typos in wording has been changed, and also my commands that has been added. She can also get additional context and so on and start working with that. And one that I immediately see here is this server help is something that repeats itself. So let's maybe add a comment where we say, okay, let's extract this into a variable. What she can do is post this immediately, but typically reviews are rather large, or at least larger than just a couple of lines of code that I've added here. So what she can also do is save a draft and add additional comments. For example, thanks for fixing these with an exclamation mark, and then add all of those at once when she ends her turn in this turn-based code review process. So what she can do to end her turn is finish her turn and say either I'm waiting for a response because there's changes that may need to be made, or there's questions that are still open, or she can accept the changes. Let's say she waits for a response, her turn ends, and now it's again my turn. So if we go back to my screen, we will see that this entire code review is now waiting for my input again. So the comment was, let's extract this one into a variable. So let's maybe do that from code here as well. And let's say this thing should become a variable where we say this is going to be replace all occurrences, and this is going to be server help name or something like that. And then we're going to commit this one and push it off to the server. So I'm adding commits to my branch, I'm adding commits to my code review, and what we will see is that those commits will first of all show up in our code review. And the next thing I can do is say, okay, this one has been fixed, and this one, that's great. So let's maybe add a smiley and also resolve that one. And we can make it header's turn again. Let's switch back to header, and header can say, okay, look, these changes are now there. Let's look at the timeline again and look at the code changes that are in now. All of this has been updated, so that's good. So what you can now do is accept the changes, and it's now my turn again, and I can start merging this code review if I want. So let's switch back to my site. And we can see there that this code review was accepted. All of the changes were accepted. So let's start merging all of this into master. So let's merge. We can rebase and squash or do an actual merge commit. I prefer this thing because it's nice and clean, especially since I added those code review branches. But again, that depends on your process that you have in your team. Let's rebase and squash. All right, my code will now be in master. And if I look at the commits, you will see that this is now indeed in master. If I filter based on the branch, again, we'll see all of that is there. Another thing that you may notice here is this icon that says something is in progress, automation is running. And we'll quickly dive into that in a bit. But first of all, I want to check if there's any questions in the meantime. No questions, we'll keep them till the end. Perfect. So yes, where was I? We have our commit on master now, and we see that there's this in progress kind of icon doing something, and that's automation. Right now in Space, in the cloud version that you can subscribe to in the early access preview, we don't have automation yet, but the idea is that we will provide automation. Of course, at some point when you commit code, you want to run a build and you want to do some CI or CD or both and make sure that your changes actually get pushed, tested, and so on. So what we have here is automation. For our current repository, we can see that there's multiple builds running, multiple automation tasks, and they're all still running. And what they will do in the end is push a package with the applications that have been updated to the package repository that is in Space, but we'll keep that for within a couple of minutes. What automation does is, first of all, CI/CD. But the goal of automation is not to only do CI/CD, it is also about automating your work inside of Space. So instead of just doing CI/CD, you can also use it to automate additional tasks that you may have in Space. So let's look at what a build definition would look like in automation. We go to the script here. We will see that in our source control, we have a script that is specific to Space. It's a .space.kts file. And in there, we can start defining all of the automation tasks that we have. So what we have here is a job. Every job that we have, every single item that you saw on the previous screen with tasks that are running is a job. And every job executes in a container. That can be just a container doing something like this one, printing hello world to the build outputs, or it can be a container that actually does something more useful than just printing hello world, like for example, the one that builds our chat application. In here, we have a container that fetches the Gradle image from the Docker registry that is online, the public one. We specify the arguments that we want to run. So we say, okay, we want to run Gradle with this specific targets or these specific targets and make sure all of that runs. And we can also specify the amount of memory that our container needs. Every job can have one container doing work, but it can also have multiple containers. It can be multiple containers executing different steps of your scripts. It can also be multiple containers that are interdependent. So for example, if you want to run tests, but you need a MySQL database next to your main container running the tests, you can also have this sidecar container where you run MySQL in a separate container inside of automation. Jobs and containers are kind of low level. What we can also do is in that container, instead of just specifying we want to run this executable within that container, what we can also do is make use of scripts. So what you can do is, for example, let's look at one of the examples that we have here on the left. What you can do is write a script. So this example here would run a script in the OpenJDK container, work with the Space API, get the current branch from that API, check if it's the dev branch, for example, and then do something with it. So imagine you would have to have custom versions depending on the branch that you're working with. What you can do is scripts, get the current branch from that Space API and do something with that to set the correct version for whatever you are working with. Other things that you could do here is, for example, work with other features that are in Space. So if inside of your automation task, you want to update an issue or maybe send a message to a chat channel or look at the team directory to see who is available to get an error notification or something like that, you can actually work from that script, from that API. You can also work with all of the other modules that are available in Space. So this one simply prints all of the members in our current organization, but just to give you an idea, you get access to all of that data if you want from your automation task, which ties in nicely to my story that it's not about only CI/CD, it's really also about automating the tasks that you have in Space. So what you could do is, for example, create a Space task that when it runs, posts a report into some chat channel, or after a deployment, posts something into a chat channel without having to work with webhooks and all of those cumbersome setups, you can simply create it from within your space automation task and run it from there. Right, but like I mentioned, space automation is not yet there. It will be very soon. I think that's probably going to be a question that is happening right now as well. So I'm going to leave that to Valerie and Mikael, who are answering the questions there. Right, we have automation, and these automation tasks run a Gradle script that basically builds our applications, packages it, and then publishes them to the space repository. And that's the next thing we are going to look at. Our code was checked in. Our code is in our Git repo that we have in space. Automation is packaging everything, and automation is also pushing it out to the package repository that we have in space. So let's go there. Space comes with integrated package repositories. Currently for Docker, for Maven, NPM, and NuGet, I'm not sure that they are already on the public cloud, but they should be soon enough. So what you can do is publish all of your packages from within CI/CD or from an automation task within Space. Or if you still have a separate solution for building your software, you can also, for example, use TeamCity or Jenkins or something like that to push, for example, container images into Space. For every repo, for every package repo, you will see the icon, the type of artifact that is being pushed into the package repository. And for example, for our Maven repository that is accepting the build artifacts from the build that we just saw, we can look at all of the artifacts that are being pushed. We can see all of the versions that are there. And for every single version, we can also look at the details and get some information on how we can add it quickly into our project if we want to do so. If you would look at, for example, the Docker containers or Docker images that are being pushed, we can also see the different versions of those. And for every image that is being pushed, we can also look at all of the layers that are in there and inspect what is happening in all of those different layers inside of our container images. Right. I'm going to do a quick pause here to check if there's any questions right now.
Hey, Martin, I've got some cool questions for you.
All right.
Here's a question. Any plans to search for files across repositories and researching in repos? Does it work across previous commits or only in head?
So search. Well, let's make search a separate topic now. That's a really good question. So I'm gonna disappoint you right now. If you search for a specific file when you're not in that specific repo, there's no way to find it. So if I search for that cache control file that was there, you won't find it. I can do a full text search, but that's a full text search that will search everywhere and not in the files that we have there. So for files inside of a repo, you really have to search for them. The nice thing is once you are in a repo, you can search for multiple things. So you can search for files, but if you have, for example, a commit hash, what you can also search for, and I'm going to use the shortcut here, is you can search for that commit hash and immediately jump to a specific commit and see what was in there. So that is possible. Search is really depending on the context that you are in. So if you're in a repo, you can still navigate the broad aspects of whatever is in space. So if you want to search for the software development team, you will see that the software development team is in there. If you want to jump to a chat channel, you will see that in there as well. But the details are not there because you're in the context of a repository in here. What is nice though is that with search, you can also search within things that are in there. So for example, if I would search for that Ktor apps package registry that we just had, what we can do is, for example, or in our project, for example, we can tab and search within our project for example, repos or issues or code reviews that are happening there. So I can dive into, for example, in my Ktor project inside of my Ktor repo. And then in that repo, I can again start searching for files. So to answer the question directly, is it possible to search across repos? No, and that's actually a really good question, I think, that is probably being noted by some folks as well on the call. But you can search across everything else that is in space as long as you use it to navigate to the points where you want to, where you actually want to end up in space. All right, let's continue on to the next thing. So I mentioned that Space is really about people, about projects, and about collaboration using all of the tools that are in Space. And one of the collaboration tools that is probably in every organization nowadays is chats, and Space is no different. We have chat in there as well. So inside Space, you will see that there is a chat where you can do the typical things that you would expect. You can have channels for teams. You can have channels that have multiple people in there. For every channel, you can also set a nice icon so that they are more visible in the list of channels that are available. And you'll also see that for issues, for code reviews, for all of those things, that channels are automatically being created. So for example, that code review request that we had previously is going to show up in chat here as well. What's interesting is that chats by default show you everything that is relevant to you in the status that you are currently working in. You can also look at your entire chat history and go back, so you can filter that. But typically, the recent contacts and the recent channels that you've been working in is much easier to work in to figure out where you want to work. Right, so we can have team chats, we can have chats with multiple people, we can have one-to-one, so that, private messaging inside the chats. There's also a couple of other really nice things. So I mentioned that in terms of people in Space, that we don't want to go with just permission management, and that's no different in chats. So instead of adding everyone separately, and the people you see here have been added because we added the software development team, but instead of having to add security groups or whatever, also chats are really focused around your organization structure. So if in your organization you have different teams, what you can do is create a chat channel where you invite, for example, software development, or if you say we want to have sales in this team as well, or in this chat, you can add the entire sales team and all of them will be added into this channel. A really nice side effect of that is that once a new member enters the sales department, for example, they will also be part of the channels that everyone is working in. Again, making it easier to collaborate with the people who are on your team or on your projects. Inside of chats, you can also have threads. So for example, this is a thread. What we can also look at is, for example, this thread about changing the channel icon, and we can dive in there and you will see the thread on the right-hand side. Now, very often threads are something that branches out of the current chat that you have going. And what you can do is, as long as that thread is still going and you quickly have to be able to jump back to that thread, what you can do is pin that thread. So if you pin a thread, the thread will show up as a different channel on the left-hand side, and you can quickly jump between both channels as well as threads. And once this discussion finalizes, once you no longer need the threads, again, you can unpin this one and it will disappear from the channel list on the left. All right, that's chats. Let's go maybe into the next one. We want to make collaboration as easy as possible, and making it as easy as possible to work in Space also means that you have to have a way of tracking what you want to do in the near or the far future. And that future, near or far, is in to-do lists. So what you can do in your to-do list is, for example, add items saying present webinar on Space. I have to learn how to type. I can say that wrap up webinar at some point is probably also a good to do today, and I can add those to-dos there. Now, this is a very plain list, but it still allows me to quickly dump my brain and do a brain dump of whatever I want to do today. If I'm not going to do this today, and let's say I want to wrap up the webinar tomorrow, I can quickly postpone that task until tomorrow or next week or even next month or a specific date. So I can quickly get it off my mind, and I will no longer see it in the list of items to handle today. Now, I can add all of those items manually, but what I can also do is add messages, add blog posts, add issues, add pretty much everything else that is in Space. I can add those to my to-do list. So for example, this channel icon here, this discussion is not super urgent, but it's still something that I want to follow up on at some point. Well, what I can do is add it to my to-do lists. And you will see that now this thread will be part of the to-do list, and we can quickly jump there. If I want to postpone this one until tomorrow, again, I can do that, and my task will only show up for tomorrow. Or I can even complete it if I want and drop it from the to-do list there. So that really makes it easy to follow up on things. Very often people ask you for something that you want to follow up on, but because of the typical context switching that you have in chats, it's very difficult to follow up on all of those requests that are coming in. Well, with to-dos, you can easily add them into your to-do list and follow up later if desired. Right. Other things that are in space. Let's go back to our homepage and look at the calendar for a little bit. So the calendar shows you the meetings that you have today, or the time blocks that you have in your agenda for today. And you can easily look at that calendar, see whatever is happening there, when it is happening, who is joining, and so on. Or you can create a new meeting. For every meeting, you can, of course, give it a title. So let's say we are doing a webinar, deliver webinar online. That's a good description. And what we can do is add the time slot for that. So let's say we started at 4 and we want to finish somewhere around 5-ish. So we can add that there, and that's done. We can also set the date. So if I would do this again tomorrow, we can quickly switch there. And if there's multiple people, I can also add multiple people. Again, adding participants can be by name. So if I, for example, want to add Heather into this call or into this webinar, I can do so and add her. But since we're working in an organization, I can also add a full team or a sub-team from somewhere in the company. So let's say sales want to join here, we can add sales, and all of sales will be added as a participant to this webinar meeting. Another interesting thing is that because we gave space the information on where everyone is located inside of our company, by adding the sales team, you will also see that all of these locations have been added to the meeting. So this means if we add anyone who is in a different office than we are, the meeting room will automatically be added based on where they are located. And we can also see the local time. So for example, 3 a.m. may be a little bit too early for the folks in the Antares office. Next thing I can do is book that meeting, and we have it on our calendar. I'm going to quickly stop for questions, but I'm going to also anticipate one question, and that question is, I think, is there also integration with Office 365, with Google Apps and all of those things? Not in production yet, but it is coming. With that, are there any other questions?
We have a lot of questions about on-premises version. So I want to reply to everyone, so everyone is aware. Of course, yes, we're planning and we're working on the on-premises version. It's planned for after the first release, which is planned for the fall of this year. So the best estimation for now is most likely it will be the beginning of the 2021. And we are, again, still working on the pricing for the on-premises version. So we cannot say for now whether it's going to be a free version there or some introductory version. We already have a free version for the cloud, and on-premises pricing is in progress.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I think, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, let's continue. Right. Some other things that we have on the homepage here and that are also in space are the absences. So I mentioned that I could show that I'm on vacation on a certain day and so on. All of this is different from a typical calendar in that they very often in the organization also have meaning. If I take vacation, it may be that I require approval from my manager. It may be that there's vacation days that have to be deducted from all of the vacation days that I have available. So all of these things are not just meetings, they are really absences. But also by marking them as absences, they have a meaning in the organization. We have approvals in there so that the manager can approve. But also, if I'm absent, this icon will show in my calendar. It will show in chats. So whenever someone tries to reach me on the 21st of May, they will see that I'm on vacation. There was no action involved for me to mention in all of the different systems around that I'm actually on vacation and not available. Also, when I'm on a business trip, what I can do is make the icon green and say that I'm still available. But what I can also do is add the location where I'm available. So if I'm doing a business trip to a different office, for example, well, I can mention that office location so that people in that location may schedule a meeting in person with me while I'm there, while I'm on a business trip. How do they discover that? Well, from looking at my profile, but maybe also from hovering over my profile in chats and seeing that I'm on a business trip to this location and quickly jumping on a chat and arranging an in-person meeting with me. So all of that is, again, another advantage of having everything integrated nicely together across all of the different aspects in space. Right. There's more to tell about absences, like, for example, the vacation days that you can configure and so on. So if you want to implement that in your organization, that's absolutely possible. But in the interest of time, I'm going to skip to the next item, and that is the team directory. The team directory in Space gives us an overview of everyone in the organization, every single person, every single team, and every single location. So if I simply go there, what we will see is a feed of everything that happens in the organization. So you can see people have joined or people have switched teams. We can see all of the different members that are in our organization, and we can look at the details, for example, for the feed or the details of all of the members. Now, this is nice to see everyone in the organization. Typically, the way you would use the team directory is by looking at your own team. So if I go back to the home page and, for example, go to the software development team, I can look at the team schedule for my team that I'm working in. I can see that, for example, today we have stand-up. If there's something else that everyone is joining, I can see those things in there. Also, every team can add a description on what they do, what their responsibilities are, and what people can expect if they reach out to that specific team. So that's also a really interesting thing to add, especially if you have more and more members in your organization. We can also see the projects that this team is working on. So it also makes it easy to jump from software development into an actual project that this team is working on. What's also really interesting is that there's a team calendar. The fact that we have those vacation days and business trips and so on in Space also means that we can have a very easy overview like this one, where we can check availability of our entire team across everyone's calendar. So instead of having to start booking a meeting, checking what is possible and so on, we can go here and see, for example, if we want to plan a team meeting and we really want everyone to be around, we'll have to jump to probably somewhere in July to be able to catch everyone who is in our team, because there's lots of vacations apparently and business trips. Also in the team directory is integration with people's profiles. And again, from chats, from code reviews, from wherever you are in Space, you can jump to a different profile in Space. On the profile page of a person, you can see when they are available or not available. You can look at the meetings they have, so you can check, shall I schedule a meeting maybe with this person, or should I go for maybe tomorrow or the day after? Contact details are there, the teams that they are working in, and so on. And if you set up Space with office locations, what you can also do is upload a plan where you can show where people are seated in the company. So what you can do is annotate where everyone is located. I can find Lucille, for example, in the company, find out where she's seated so that I can go there and ask a question. But what I can also do is, for example, see that Rebecca, I know her. Oh, she's in the same office. So I can see the same thing from the office plan here, or from the floor plan. So team directory, again, integrates everything around the organization, around the people, into one directory. It surfaces in chats. So for example, I can have a chat channel with just the software development team or multiple teams if that's needed. And again, having those integrated makes it easy to collaborate across chats, across source code, across projects, and so on. Right, let's go for the last big item that we have in the webinar here, and that is blogs. So from the homepage, I mentioned that you can see the news that is relevant to you, and we can see all of the blog items here. And this is really an important aspect of Space, where you can communicate through blogs. Blogs can either target the entire company, or they can target just a specific team. So if I would write a new blog post, what I can do is write it, for example, for the sales team who are in Denver, or for everyone in Denver, or from multiple teams and so on. So I can specify all of those things from there if I want. Another thing that I can do with a blog post is add an event. So for example, one of the examples we have on the homepage here is this all hands meeting. That is a blog post targeted to the entire company with an event attached. So on the 25th of June, we have an all hands meeting in this company, and I can write a blog post saying what it will be about. People can answer, people can start chatting about it to see whether they should be there or if they have any questions before the meeting happens. And they can also RSVP from here, so say I'm going or maybe I'm going, yes or no. And all of this is also automatically added to our calendar. So this is kind of nice. This one was a company-wide one. Apparently, Hadi Smith wrote a blog post for just our team or just the Algo location, where he says, look, I'll be on a business trip, but I will bring some cake. So if you're around, feel free to join us in the canteen and we'll have a piece of cake together. Well, we can add comments there, and everyone who is in the Algo office in this case will be able to see this specific blog post in their feed as well. Again, here, blog posts can be added to our to-do list. So if I want to read this, but not now, I can add it to my to-do list, and you will see that this blog post also shows up in our to-do lists. If there's a specific comment we want to address, same thing, add the comment to our to-do list, and we can start working on that one later on today or tomorrow or next week or whatever period we decide we want to postpone this to. Right, I'm almost done here. I just want to quickly mention two other important things. One is that Space has multiple apps available. So from your profile, what you will find is Space client apps. If you're on Windows, Mac, Linux, there's a desktop app that you can use. If you have an iOS device or an Android device, you can get an app for Space for those devices as well. And again, if you have a JetBrains-based IDE, IntelliJ, Rider, PyCharm, WebStorm, any of those, you can also get a Space integration plugin, which currently makes it really easy to find the projects that you're working on and all of the repos that you may want to start working on at some point. With that, there's one additional thing that I want to show, and that is the HTTP API playgrounds. So Space, since there's so many systems, so many things that integrate, we decided to also expose most of those elements in an API. So for example, if you want to write some automation or there's something missing, or maybe from one of those automation scripts, you want to do something with Space, but you don't know how. If you find the HTTP API playground, you can also find out all of the different methods that are available. So for example, if I want to get my profile information, there should be a get info method that I can use, or I can get my full checklist tree, or I can work with my to-dos, for example. If I search for to-do, I can get all of my to-do items. And even from this HTTP API playground, I can quickly execute it and see what the data is that I get back from the API, so I can quickly start working with it and maybe integrate a third-party system that is not yet available in Space. Right. I think I'm done with that. So Valerie, if there's any questions, let's skip to that.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for the great presentation. We have a lot of questions. Like, I was too optimistic when I said that we're going to handle all of them. We will, and we'll publish the blog post with all the answers, so don't worry. I just want to touch some general questions that might be interesting for everyone. For example, there was a question about hiding the features or the modules that teams are not using in Space at the moment. So, for example, if the company doesn't use to-do lists, can they hide them, or chats? Well, it's not supported in Space at the moment, and we think that Space is is integrated system. So you might be benefiting even from not using the feature in its full potential. But for example, if you're not using chats, you're still getting notifications there, or you might start using this feature in the future. So we don't want to limit anyone, but if that's the restriction from inside the company, or you don't want to have the UI cluttered, I will pass it to the team and we'll think about that. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, can I quickly add something on top of that? It's not really about disabling features in Space, but what you can still do as a person who is using Space is customize the sidebar here. So every feature will still be available. But for example, if you're not using chats in your organization, you can everyone can disable it from the sidebar so that it doesn't show, and you don't have to always see it in the sidebar, so you can customize it to just the items that you want there. Also, you can add custom projects there if you have a favorite, so you can customize the sidebar a little bit. So it's not disabling things, but it can help you in maybe hiding the things that you're not using too often.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, the next question I would like to cover is a general one. The value of space look like it will mostly be encompass of entire business infrastructure in one platform. Is that official space goal to ensure that all work, repos, issue management, chats, planning are wrapped into space? Yes, this is true, and this is the definition of space. Space is the integrated team environment, and our goal here is to combine the whole infrastructure into one platform. So some of the tools will be available in space out of the box, for example, like development tools, as Martin showed you, and some of the tools will be integrated there because we realize that it's impossible to cover all the tools, all the professional tools by ourselves. But the main idea of space is the platform and combining everything together. So this is true. Also, there are a lot of questions about a knowledge base, knowledge management in space. We are working on this part. We already have the first prototype that we're using internally, and the work here moves really fast. So hopefully we'll be able to show you something in 2-3 months. But that's a really rough estimation. But yeah, this is something that has a lot of progress already.
Quickly adding on to that one, since I'm working on a development version, I can actually enable some of those features. So if you're interested, this is what the knowledge base is going to look like, where you can create books, and books are really the topics that you want to start working with in the knowledge base. And then within those books, you can start adding articles, adding people, reviewing those things, etc. Just so you get an idea of what is coming there.
Yeah, it looks really cool. Also, there is a popular question about integration with calendars. So what we are we're working on a better standalone support of meeting and calendars in space. So the invitations, the options to share meeting into the chat is coming soon. Also, the option to invite external participants are also coming. It's already developed. And also at the same time, of course, we're working on the integration with other calendars. First of all, it's Google Calendar and Microsoft Calendar. So Google Calendar integration, it's something that's more or less ready, and we are also using it inside JetBrains and preparing it for the external release. So it will be available soon, and Microsoft integration will be also ready before the release. These are, I think, yeah, the synchronization with calendars. Yeah, it already works as a two-way synchronization with Google Calendar. The same thing will be available for Microsoft. A lot of questions also about agile boards, issue tracking, time management, backlog management. Of course, all of these are planned for the future because we understand that you need a full featured issue tracker inside space. We've started to work on the agile boards already. It might not make it to the first release and come a little bit later, but this is planned and this is something we're working on. Also, there are a lot of features that we are working on for the issue tracker, like custom fields, like operations on multiple issues, like better views, and better integrations with other parts of space. I mean, like code reviews, like checklists, like personal to-do, and other things. So these are all planned and coming. Martin, do you want to add something?
No, I still have a quick summary slide, but that basically summarizes what you just mentioned. So if there's any questions, we can keep going or we can wrap up here.
I just found one more question that I would like to answer, because a lot of questions about plugins, extensibility, and marketplace. So will you have a marketplace for selling plugins? The question here is yes, definitely. We are working on it and it will be available. We're planning to have some free extensions and applications, and some of them will be paid, as we relied here on our partners. We're planning to launch our partner program soon. So if you are available to, if you are interested to work on the integrations for space, please contact us. We'll be happy to talk. I think that other questions are, no, one more question about CI/CD and automation, because it looks like we are ignoring these questions. So we, couple of months ago, we had internal release of automation inside JetBrains. So we already started to use it, and we're preparing for the external release. We don't have accurate estimation for now, but 2-3 months sounds like a good one. Yeah, so we'll of course do additional announcement when it's available. And all the questions, there are some specific questions about like script supported and operation system supported. I will reply to them in the written form.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in summary, we can say that Space is a platform that tries to bring people, projects, and collaboration tools together in an integrated team environment. So all of the things that we've showed you, a couple of those that are still on the roadmap, are the things that will come together in Space and will make it, basically make it an integrated story that you can use in your organization as well. With that, I want to thank you for joining from my side. Thanks, Valerie and Mikhail, for handling questions in the meanwhile. Also, if you want to learn more about Space, check out our websites. If you're already using Space or want to see a couple more things, we have the Space Guide as well, which has very short videos showing how some things are done in Space. And do follow us on Twitter as well. And if you want to follow me, you can do so as well. But I tweet about .NET and Space and a couple of other things as well. With that, again, thank you, and we'll see you next time.